Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Access Show. Mark Muscat is the CEO of Digital Access Solutions and Assistive Technology, the founder, the owner of the Digital Access Show. And we actually had a talk about it and thought we really wanted to have a bit more of a discussion around the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines Principle of Operability, because that is often where a lot of websites fail. Hi, Mark, and thank you for coming on.
Hi, Narelle. Thank you. Good to be back on yet again. I don't know when we did the last one, which was
That was about,
perceivable,
yeah, it was. Yeah,
and yeah, it was a while back.
it
Anyway,
was. And really, between perceivable and operable, they're where most of the issues that we find for accessibility, aren't they? For digital accessibility.
yeah, the two main groups for any compliance for the guidelines. So
Yeah,
we're understanding and is the third major one, and
robust. Yeah,
the
yeah,
robust is probably it's only got really two clauses in
yeah,
robust, but that's probably going to increase with the updates to the WCAG. So that will probably uh, change in time, where we'll have some more um, levels of conformance. I think it's breaking down into three conformance groups. But anyway, we'll do it. We'll cover that when that comes into play. But
yeah.
operability is um, pretty much the guts of any web um, accessibility conformance testing and auditing, because that is focused on the operation of various parts within the web page. Uh, can it be used by people with keyboards as well as mouse? Can the um, person who is using the website access all the controls with their respective assistive technology equipment and software? And it just goes on. So we'll cover that as we go through. I don't know where you want to lead on with this,
Yeah.
but
Well,
yeah,
I think, well, one of the biggest problems that we find is that first guideline, which is keyboard accessibility. Most websites tend to fail on this. Even if the menu is right, it will be other things, isn't it? Where you just, with a keyboard, can't access the content.
precisely. So this is when we talk about keyboard, we're talking about the functionality of using the various keyboard commands. Uh, there's basically using the tab key and the shift tab keys to actually move forward and backwards through the controls and content that is found on a website or web page. And we are focusing on the ability to um, bring up various controls. So what controls you would bring up with the mouse by hovering over or clicking on it should also be accessible to those who just have a keyboard. And the testing for this is pretty straightforward. Just put your mouse away and try to use your website with a keyboard using the tab key and the shift tab key. We'll talk about
Mm.
assistive technology a little bit later, but there are obviously further ways to navigate websites, which come into that operability um, and functions of operability.
Yeah,
So, but the basic one is just to use the tab and shift tab key. Um, and often you'll find that there's certain controls and certain assets or aspects of the web page that just cannot be accessed. In some cases, menus cannot be escaped from. That being the case where if you go into a menu, you want to be able to press the escape key to actually come out of that menu and go back to the page. So sometimes
Yeah,
that doesn't work as well.
yeah. And it's interesting because it is so often overlooked, but how many people a mouse dies unexpectedly? It happens often.
Yeah.
And I mean, the standard rule is keyboard only, and the site has to be mouse only, and the site has to be touch only.
And if
And
you
if you
really
need
wanted
that,
to,
mhm,
you can implement your own keyboard shortcuts as well,
yeah,
by using various JavaScript
yeah,
and various pieces of code to do that. Um, and that enhances the use of um, your website and web pages. So being able to press a shortcut key to actually invoke or utilize a button is actually quite nice. And if you know that there's a button that people are going to frequently use, a shortcut key would be really appreciated by most keyboard users.
but Mark, a
So
lot of shortcut keys are used by other apps as well. What is the when the shortcut keys are used by other apps, how do you get around that? Because you can't cross over. Like Control
yeah,
C is a standard copy, isn't it?
precisely. And it's a case of just knowing the keyboard shortcuts that other apps use, trying them out when you do testing. Even before you implement, you can even try doing some of the keyboard shortcuts to see, okay, does Control Shift C actually do anything? Oh no, it's fine. It's looks like it's free to use.
Yeah,
Um, just being a little bit vigilant about the whole setting up the keyboard shortcuts and testing them out before you do it and testing them out after.
yeah,
Um, most web applications will use combinations such as Control Shift or Alt Shift so that they don't interfere with any Windows or global based commands that may come with the operating system or even with the browser.
yeah.
So it's important to try that out. Um,
Excellent.
yeah,
The second guideline is all called, it's about time based. And it is where, say, a good example is you log on to your bank and you've only got a certain time to carry out a process, whether it's transfer money, whatever it is. And it's hard to navigate using assistive technology at times as well if the website's not set up correctly. And you've got that time factor, isn't it?
yeah. So you want to allow for people to be able to get a warning to say that their time expiry is coming up
Mhm.
and that they need to um, uh, activate a button that says, give them more time or yes, I'm still here. Um, I think most of the time you will find that there will be the functionality to extend the time rather than pressing it to say I'm here because that could obviously hold people up or
Yeah.
hold systems up. So yeah, the idea of prompting people is a good idea
Mm.
to actually allow them to have more time to perform the necessary tasks that complete the form.
One of the other
Uh,
things I often see now is just giving a code that a reference code of some type that's saved and they use to log back in. Is that a good way to get around it?
uh, oh, oh, the say like a callback code or something like
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, look, if it's accessible, it can be useful, but sometimes I think you'll find that that can confuse people even more. Um, there are forms where you will be able to do save changes and come back to a particular section. So you'll see a lot of those forms. They're
yeah.
okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, there. So sometimes it's a case of knowing how much to put on a form.
Yeah,
If you have a form that has 20, 30, 40, 50 fields to fill in, that's a lot of data to collect in one form. If you try to break the forms up into meaningful sections and have appropriate next and back buttons, and
Mhm.
save buttons. That often can be much more effective,
Right.
and then it gives people more time to do the
Mm.
general the whole task that's required. Um,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. That is a very important thing to take into consideration, how much time people would need to do it. And the more accessible, the less time, obviously. So
Yeah.
if people are able to come back to that keyboard navigation, if people are able to navigate with the keyboard or with the mouse or their assistive technology and they're able to do that quickly, then obviously they'll complete the form within an appropriate time. But if you have an inaccessible form, that just makes it difficult.
Mm.
Um,
What
yeah.
about the third guideline, which is seizures and physical reactions? Now, I've run into this a couple of months ago, actually, where a website was a maroney red, a lot of maroney red on it, and I
Mm.
was physically sick looking at it because it
Well,
was a really
you're
bright
probably the best to
maroney
talk.
red.
You're probably best to talk about this one because um, as much as I am aware of it, it's probably one of those visual things that is worth having somebody who sometimes experiences it
Mm.
go through it. And yeah, I'll leave that
Yeah,
one
that,
with
yeah,
you.
yeah, because really what we're saying there is if you've got anything that moves really quickly, if it flashes more than 3 times in a second, slow it down. If it's not needed, don't let it flash. And it could be like colors can cause physical reactions. And the other one is when things are moving in opposite directions to each other. So if you've got series of lines moving one way and then another series of lines moving another way, it can give some quite severe physical reactions. And by physical reactions, I'm talking nausea, migraines, vomiting, epileptic fits, seizures of different types. It's a real
Mm.
issue. So what I always say to everyone, just avoid it. I don't know what the need would be to have something flashing that quickly. Even think about on social media, those GIFs, Mark, that they do, and you might have seen it because you've got no sight, but they move really quickly. And around Christmas time, one of the biggest ones is those Christmas trees with the blinking lights. And I never thought
Yeah.
about it and I thought, oh, hang on, they actually flash really quickly. So I don't actually use those gifts anymore, but it's a guideline that people do need to consider.
So what we're talking about here is animations,
Yeah.
and not totally against animations. I think if you want to use animations in your website to sell your products, to do the various marketing that you want to do, you should be allowed to use them. What the guidelines are, as we've always said, they're a thoroughly researched group of guidelines, and the guidelines are quite clear about the frequency of animation, that being the flashes, and how much they should move in a particular time period. So it's really important that if you're going to do animations, to avoid any possibility of physical seizures or um, disturbances with people, it's probably worth looking at the regulations in terms of what frequencies to be using for animations. There are methods for testing these. Um, Obviously, looking at them be one, but you can actually set up in uh, in a programming sense, you can actually set up um, measures where you can see how many times they're actually moving in a particular second. So that is worth considering, um, and keeping within the guideline figure. So what's I think it's something like 7 or 8 times a second or something you
It's
want
in
to
more
do.
than 3 times a second. You need to
Yeah.
slow it
So you
down.
need to,
Yeah.
yeah. So you want to make sure that you want to make sure that that's what's happening with animations if you go and a lot of people tend to still like to use animations um, for their presenting of their products. So
Yeah,
it's just something that we need to take into consideration when we're testing in the
yeah,
operability.
that's it. Mark, the fourth guideline for operability is navigable, and this is such a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, this comes back to what we were saying earlier with the keyboard, having having the ability to actually navigate from one part to another on any particular web page
Mm.
using a keyboard, but also with assistive technology, because there are methods that assistive technology provide users to actually navigate from parts to other parts and from one web page to another. And it's a case of making sure that buttons are buttons, links are links,
Headings are headings.
headings are headings.
Yeah.
This is all done through styles. That when you hit enter, you actually activate a button or a link
Mm.
if it is meant to be. That if something is meant to be a clickable item, that it is represented in a way that assistive technologies will be able to pick it up and convey that information to the user of that assistive technology software. So, for instance, the screen reader will say, um, you know, uh, clickable, and it might say the name of the item, just to allow the user to know, hey, you can actually hit enter on this, and this will provide a certain function. So they're important. So that's all
Yeah.
part of that nav, and also um, making sure that heading levels are in accordance to each other. So you don't have um, a heading level 1 and a heading level 3 followed after. Um, I think we were talking about this last week, but yeah, there are there is a sequence that it follows. So you have your heading level 3s under heading level 2s and the heading level 2s. So there is an order to things
Yeah.
when you are looking at that. Um,
And the big thing with that people need to remember as well, and it's not just that, it's reading order is important. And the
yeah,
other thing is focus, because when you've got a lot of information on a page, a lot of fields, you want to be able to find visually where you are. And one of the things I would say, just make your focus a box, consider your contrast rules, and make the box width, the border width of a box 3 pixels at a minimum. Let people work out where they are visually quickly, instead of at times, you've got to tab backwards and forwards or work out where you are. There's a lot of issues in there that can cause all types of um, problems for people,
yes,
isn't there?
yeah. That's right. So if you want to make sure that there is a really distinctive way to actually know where the focus is moving to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, a highlight for that is, so if you're using assistive technology or you're helping somebody with assistive technology use a particular website, you want to know where they are, and whenever they're using their keyboard or their assistive technology to actually navigate that, you want to be able to see where that focus is actually moving to. So
Yeah.
um, it's one thing to use a mouse to do that, which it should be able to. Um, and it goes the other way too. If somebody's using a mouse, you want the screen reader to actually often read the information, and that's really dependent on the assistive technology itself. It's not something that is required by uh, a website to have, but you want that to actually work in that
Yeah.
way as well. So if I'm working with you, Narelle, and you're moving your mouse, I can actually tell
Mm.
by the screen reader telling me what you're on or what you're
Yeah.
focused.
Yeah. And that's it. Mark, the last one is one that, again, I don't think people think enough of, and that's input modalities. And we're talking about how the options that people are given to input data into a form on a
Oh,
website
yeah.
or a PDF. It's a huge problem, that one, because one of the issues I often see is no labels, using placeholders only.
Hmm.
And that is really bad practice.
I think the other one I noticed is the various date pickers
Oh, yes.
filling in calendar, uh, filling in dates. They're often difficult and they're not accessible.
Mm.
So it's one thing to have a valid or a validation process for input of data, but you need to make sure that um, is also accessible so that you actually do get the valid data and that the input is actually correct. Um,
And it
because
could even be putting things like tips, like what format you want the date in and the label as well. It's simple
and
stuff.
that's all to do with messaging,
Yeah.
putting the right messaging um, in the forms as well,
Mm.
making sure that yeah, it's one thing to actually encourage correct and valid data, but you need to also state what that correct valid data should look like.
It's
Um,
garbage in, garbage out, isn't it? If you don't tell them how you want it, you probably will get garbage, which means you've got to take
yes,
time to fix the garbage or verify the data.
yes, yeah.
So in the end,
Um,
actually, that's another cost to the business, isn't it?
long-term wise, it could be detrimental for anyone collecting data for their
Mm.
business because you're not going to get the right data that you will be able to analyze, and
Yeah,
often that could lead to some ill-informed decisions
yeah, that's
when
it.
it comes down to it. And often you'll find yourself chasing up information that should have easily been acquired had the messaging conveying what was required was yeah, part of that form that you're setting up. So yeah, there's a whole lot to this. It's yeah, the hints and the help tags, and I mean they're all
Yeah,
part of it. But there's also when you validate data, you need to make sure that if there's an error, the user is actually understanding what the error is.
yeah,
Um,
that's it. And that's
yeah,
part of the principle of an understandability, though, that section, isn't
that's
it?
right. That comes into that
Yeah,
third principle, which we
yeah,
need to talk about. So
we will.
um,
So, yeah, so
yes,
operability, Mark, it can be a real mind trap for people, can't it?
look, if it's done correctly and it's done well, it's actually um, not that difficult. And it's one of
Mm.
those, for me, it's one of the easiest principles because it makes sense if you look through the four or five um, sections for operability. It
Mm.
makes sense. And if you develop um, and put the right measures into play at the time of development, it often will be something that just flows on whenever you make any updates in the future. So
Mm.
you just need to, when you get to the stage of designing and implementation, you need to just take in operability, if anything, in accessibility. The operability principle needs to be part of that implementation and design phase of the
Mm.
software life cycle. So
Thanks,
yeah,
Mark.
no worries.
Look, thanks for your time today, Mark. How can people keep getting in chatting with you about it? If they want to find out more about
Uh,
operability and
we can
everything about WCAG.
put our email address up, um,
Yep.
and it's reception at dasat.com.au. And yeah, that's you go to the website dasat.com.au, and uh, all our contact details are there as well. So
Well, thank you. So this is another episode of the Digital Access Show, and operability is an important, very important principle because really it can kill a website. If it's not done properly, a website can not be a usable, accessible document. So if you like what we do, please like, share, subscribe. We'd love review, comment on our work. Absolutely love it. And we'll see you at the next Digital Access Show. Bye-bye.